we're in the midst of a war. It's a spiritual war where Satan is from the beginning attempting to overthrow God. And God, Homo sapiens, created in God's likeness to be his family, are caught in the crossfire.
And the beans. And in fact, Representative Tim Burchett recently said on one of his I don't know what his motivation is about that. It's rather interesting to me that he did say that. That it was revealed to him in a skiff that this program does exist. The implant itself doesn't get rejected by the body because let's call them the aliens, right? They wrap the implant in the person's own DNA before they insert it back into the body.
I saw somebody for an uncomplicated ankle sprain get an x-ray of his right foot. He's from Saudi Arabia. I have a interpreter. He speaks English. Get the x-ray, and there's two things in his heel that look like pins. And they were about an inch long. The
following program is presented for general information, education and entertainment purposes only and is not intended to be advice of any kind. The content, views, thoughts and opinions expressed in this program are those of the individuals involved. The use of information on this program is at the user's own discretion.
Reverend Stu, what is going on with you?
Hey, that's very melodic, Mike. You're working out a bit of a tune there.
Yeah, sure. It does flow off the tongue, doesn't it?
But I did appreciate it. I'm doing very well to answer your question. How are you?
Excellent. I'm doing very well, too. And I read somewhere one of our reviews for the audio-only podcast said it slides right down the ear canal and it's easy to listen to. So I think that's great.
Well, thank you very much.
But no, really, that was a real review that somebody posted. So if you're out there, thank you for that. And we hope that you are still listening in. So, there's Stuart, we've talked about this a little bit before, where Vice President of United States, J.D. Vance, recently said that, he said the UFOs, not necessarily aliens, but the UFOs were demons. And, I've already, told you my opinion on that one. I think we sort of share the same, well, I don't know. What do you think about that?
Oh, you want to get me in trouble, Mike? Okay. Oh, this is a tricky one because I am an ordained Christian minister and there's a large portion of us ministers that think that way, but I'm trying to keep more of an open mind here. Look, I'll tell you what I've mentioned in the past. No, it's good. It needs to be talked about. I'm suspicious of their motives, the UFOs or, aliens, whatever you want to call them. Mm-hmm. But I'm still open-minded about their function. So if you come from an all things work for good sort of perspective, it might be the mechanism for us to learn lessons. I don't know. So I'm not being closed off about this.
Okay, so it sounds like you might be on the undecided fence or whatever.
Yeah,
it's fine. So. It's fine.
No, that's okay. I've got some ideas about it, but they're still forming, much like this whole topic. But I don't want to close the conversation down, you see. I still want to be able to hear all perspectives on this.
Okay, fair enough and very good. And with what we do, I feel like it's a topic that we really can't not face head on, right? And we've been approached by a couple people actually who wanted to talk about this exact thing. And there's a gentleman here who we're going to bring in. He's actually a medical doctor and an author, and he. His academic interests include Christian apologetics and end-time prophecy from a medical perspective.
Okay, that's sounding intriguing already. I like this mix of knowledge and perspectives.
He's written a couple books, actually. And I will say this, too. Like, I did tell him in advance that we're open to having this conversation in a mature, respectful way. This isn't a debate, but I did say I don't necessarily share your viewpoint or whatnot. But I think that's important too, for both sides to hear the other side, as it were, and kind of see where we land at the end. But anyway, one of his books is The Mark of the Beast and Alien Abductions. Unveiling Satan's strategies to overthrow God and his attack on the human genome. It's the product of a 5-year study. And they ask the question, is the biological model of Satan's modus operandi to destroy humanity before the flood of Noah, specifically corruption of the human genome? And this is Satan's strategy to destroy the human genome in the end time through alien-human hybridization and the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast will be genetic editing.
There's a lot to unpack there, and one of the things I would like to ask, and please jump in with this if I forget, is there a want or a need from these beings to integrate with us and sort of incarnate with us together? Because I've heard those sort of stories in some of the abductee accounts.
Okay, that's a great point and question. I'll try to jot that one down real quick in a moment. And then his other book, The Crucifixion of Jesus, a medical doctor examines the death and resurrection of Christ, the result of a 10-year study. Roman crucifixion and Jesus' cause of death are discussed in detail. Arguments seeking to explain away the resurrection of Christ are examined, and the idea that Jesus' disciples were hallucinating when they saw him after his crucifixion is debunked as medically illogical.
I actually like that, Mike, because I was talking to someone here in Australia when the Westall UFO event came up again, because I think it's its 60th year. And I explained to this friend of mine, that a whole bunch of school kids saw it, teachers saw it, and after he patiently waited till I explained it, he said to me, "That's a mass hallucination. All those people were hallucinating together." So I've heard that kind of thing in relation to the UFO phenomena as well. So I'd like to hear his perspective on that.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. From my perspective, it's whatever lens that you have in terms of, are you open to, and that's why I think this conversation is so important for this channel to have, because this is going to be, we're going to tread lightly and we're going to be respectful, but it's going to be different than anything that we've talked about before. I think is a fair thing to say.
Mike, I really like that perspective, unfiltered, unrestricted conversations, because we need this conversation to continue respectfully and together. So thank you.
Absolutely. Universal Disclosure Podcast proudly welcomes Joseph Bergeron. All right, Joseph, thanks so much for joining us. We're excited to have you here and spend some time and talk about some stuff. Like, I don't know if you're aware or not, but recently Vice President J.D. Vance said on a podcast that he thought UFOs were basically demons, and it's definitely this conversation that we're about to have is one that's been around the UFO world for a bit, and we're excited to explore it with you and just see where we might lead to, because there is some folks out there who've done some other kinds of research, and what you have to say, I think, is interesting, is definitely worthy of a conversation.
Yes, and I mean, that's precisely why I think it's important, because there's a movement within the political arena to bring disclosure. J.D. Vance, Tulsi Gabbard, the president himself have made statements about the disclosure, and I think it's important, particularly those of us with a Judeo-Christian perspective, I think, need to take a lens from the Bible and look at what's happening in terms of UFOs and aliens, particularly alien abductions, and what it means going forward, because isn't that the most important thing? I would differ with the vice president. I don't think that aliens are demons. The reason is that demons have very different characteristics if we look at them from the Gospels. And there's not a lot really in the Bible about demons. The most revealing things are Jesus's interactions with them, and particularly, if you look at the madman from Gadara, the legion, it's an interesting interaction between those verified demons and Jesus himself, that they recognize him and they say things like, "Don't send us out of our area." Well, aliens don't say that. They're traveling I would say interdimensionally, and they're traveling around. They're not affixed to any particular place, so far as I can tell by accounts that I've read about them or heard about them. And the characteristics are just different, and I think it's a hard case to sell, for me at least, that aliens are actually demons. Now, I'm going to tell you, and I don't mean to be circuitous about it, but I'm going to tell you how I got to studying this. Please. In Genesis chapter 6, where it talks about the Nephilim.
Yep.
You know the passage. It's right before the flood of Noah. In the King James Version, it says that there were giants on the earth in those days. And the sons of God went into the daughters of men, and they bore children that were the men of renown, I think is how the King James uses the word. And most people interpret that to say, well, angels and human females had sexual intercourse and bore children that were giants. And I remember hearing that when I was a teenager, and I thought, no, they didn't. And maybe I'll understand that one day in the sweet by and by, but that's a back burner item. I don't understand it. I don't see how it's possible. Any ladies listening that have born children, the idea of siring a giant baby from an angel, how does that sound to you? Well, I mean, if we take, so I started studying that, and I thought, there's got to be, because what it represents in that passage is that there was human hybridization occurring that was preceded the flood of Noah. And if that's true, is there a biological correlate that we can find that gives some sort of empiric evidence to the argument that there was hybridization occurring that propelled God to intervene on the earth with a flood? I knew for several years, I've known that, and it's well accepted that Homo sapiens, ancient Homo sapiens, hybridized with archaic humans. Archaic humans are human species that are now extinct. The most famous one is Neanderthal. And you and I and everybody of Western European ancestry have 1 to 4% of our DNA is from Neanderthals. And I'll just tell you, I never signed for authorization for that. I don't approve. I don't agree with it. I don't want any Neanderthal DNA. And there are disease conditions that are associated with Neanderthal DNA markers. And other parts of the world are less likely to have that, particularly the African races. But it's pretty common in those of Western European ancestry. How did it get there?
Okay.
Well, there was hybridization with Homo sapiens and archaic humans, and the Neanderthals that we know of, and another species called Denisovans. And there was hybridization between them. Apart from, Homo sapiens aside, the other human species got together and hybridized too. So it was a prehistoric Woodstock. If you're a child of the 60s, 70s, so it was rampant. How to say it? Free flow of genetic material between species.
Okay.
So that led me to the idea, what if what we're talking about with the sons of men and the sons of God and the daughters of men, what if those are hybridization between human species that is corrupting the Homo sapien DNA? Because you remember, so let's just for granted, I mean, there were other human species living at the same time when early Homo sapiens were living. That's generally accepted. And so God breathed into Adam the breath of life, and he became something different. He became a living soul, right? And he was made in the image and likeness of God. The DNA that God imparted into Adam it encoded the likeness of God. So if God wants to attack, if the devil wants to attack the Homo sapiens species and destroy it, how would he do it? And that's the overarching theme of my book, is that we're in the midst of a war. It's a spiritual war where Satan is from the beginning attempting to overthrow God, and God, Homo sapiens, created in God's likeness to be his family, are caught in the crossfire. And so you see that if the enemy meaning Satan is going to attempt to destroy the Homo sapiens species, how is he going to do it? Well, he could separate the species from God biologically, which would be by genetic corruption, and separate the species spiritually by sin. So Adam sins, he's expelled from the garden. He is now a homeless guy, with a pick and shovel, who's sent out to live on his own. And then it's very interesting that you have the first generation. Now you remember, if you go back to the Garden of Eden, God shows up and he says, "What have you done?" And Eve says, "Well, the serpent tricked me," and Adam's there with her, and Paul said that Adam wasn't tricked. He was with Eve, and he followed her, in sin. And so sin has been inherited by all of us from that interaction. But God, he places a curse not on Satan, on the serpent. And what I never thought about this, the serpent has descendants. Do you know that? I mean, if you look at Genesis chapter 3:15, God curses the serpent, and there's going to be contention between you and the Messiah, and you're going to strike his heel, and he's going to crush your head. Right? Mm-hmm. That's not Satan. He's talking to the serpent. And so one of the arguments I make in the book is that we have two branches of evil descending from the Garden of Eden to now, active now. One of them is Satan, who's always cloaked. He's never seen. In the book of, I think it's in Isaiah, where it says people are going to see Satan. Are you the one that has troubled all the nations of the world? They're going to be surprised to see this entity, right? But he always acts cloaked. He gets a surrogate, like the serpent, who was more cunning, who had characteristics that kind of, maybe overlapped with the enemy in some way, and so that they became cohorts. And so Satan's destiny was cooked already. But the serpent became his accomplice, and the serpent became cursed, and the seed of the serpent became cursed. And so I make the argument in the book. I understand it's conjecture or theological conjecture, but I would say that the aliens that we see are descendants of the serpent. And so you have these two branches of evil that have been at work on the earth since the beginning. Satan himself being cloaked and influencing political, religious leaders, and the seed of the serpent, who are acting covertly, and probably through history, we don't know, people that in ancient times thought they were seeing gods, meeting gods, worshiping these things having some sort of interaction. That may have been alien abductions of some sort. So back to the and you guys please jump in and ask questions and direct the conversation if you like.
Well, thank you. I did want to do that just now. When you're talking about like the serpent, I'm assuming that you're talking about it like a literal snake, right? Like,
well, not in the way that we think about it. I mean, he was walking before God cursed him, right?
Okay, so that's where I'm getting lost a little bit, because my question was going to be like, how is like the alien, as it were, a descendant of the serpent? Because from my perspective, a serpent is a snake, like, slithering on the ground type of thing.
Well, I mean, again, I don't know that I can answer that you specifically. I mean, a lot of the aliens are described as reptilian. Why are they described that way?
Well, okay, there is that.
And so. But my point being, and again, you can make the argument that I'm wrong, but if you have two branches of evil that are descending through time from the Garden of Eden, one being Satan himself directing world affairs and human behavior to some point, who's always cloaked and never exposes himself, even in the end time, the beast and the mark and the beast prophet, and they're going to, they will absolutely represent Satan, but Satan's not there. He's surrogates he's got operating. And then, so my argument, part of the argument is in the book is that the aliens are the seed of the serpent that have descended through time. So you have a branch that occurs in the Garden of Eden that descends through time with a partnership of evil whose mission is to destroy the Homo sapiens species as were created in God's likeness, God's family, and beyond that to overthrow God directly. And they still think they're going to be able to do that, apparently.
Well, I would like to jump in and just say, from a ufologist's perspective, alien abductions do occur, and they're worldwide, and it doesn't matter what the people's belief system is or what their religious background is or whatnot. It's pretty even representation, if you will, across the population. But with that said, the question is, why are these beings, whatever you might want to call them, why are they even doing it? And there is within the ufology world, the theory or the postulation that there is a hybridization program of sorts between us and the beings. And in fact, Representative Tim Burchett recently said on one of his I don't know what his motivation is about that. It's rather interesting to me that he did say that, that it was revealed to him in a skiff that this program does exist or whatever. So all of that lead up to why is it that they would want to corrupt the human genome, or how, what would be the point? Because Stuart and I were talking earlier before we started the recording here, and it's just like we all end up in the same place. We're only here for a short time, and nobody gets out alive, as it were. So what's the end game of the corruption of the genome? Like, how does it work?
Well, this is a point. Let me go back to Genesis, because you look at Cain. Adam and Eve have another child named Abel.
Mm-hmm.
And what does Eve say? God gave me another seed. Right? So she's thinking, oh, she understands, or it's a kind of a prophetic statement. Maybe she thought that he was the Messiah, if it were, or at least that the Messiah would derive from Abel, but Cain kills him. And you have this. It's a complex discussion, I think, because you have Abel's blood calling out to God, and I think in Western scientific thinking, we compartmentalize everything, whereas I think that's probably not true from a biblical perspective, where you have a sort of a coalescence or inseparability of human biology, the blood, which, before we understood DNA, how would you describe relationships that have a genetic relationships? You'd call them blood relationships, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have this concept of lifeblood in the Bible, where God tells Noah, well, you can't kill a human being because you can't take the life's blood of a human being, because they're made in the image and likeness of God. And then you have Abel's blood calling out to God. But Cain says to God, "This is too much for me. Whoever sees me is going to kill me." Who was he talking about? His mom and dad? He knew that there were other humans around that were not part of the family. They were going to kill him. So God puts a mark on him. Well, where did Cain go and live? I mean, you have, Cain's family line is discussed. This is in Genesis chapter 5, I think. Stops at the sixth generation, I think. Whatever the guy's name, Tubal-Cain, I think. So it stops, and he drops out, and then he's not mentioned in Adam's descendants anymore. So I make the argument in the book that Cain found community in an archaic human species, now extinct, and that his progeny adopted, they became genetically corrupted, they became morally corrupted by adopting the culture and whatever religious practices of his adopted community may have had. And so that's where you come back to, if the daughters of men were Cain's descendants and the sons of God were Seth's descendants, then you have a Homo sapien population from Seth that is genetically mixing with a corrupted species that's no longer in the image and likeness of God. It's no longer related to the facsimile that God had created, and they're cross-mingling to the point that by the time the flood is about to occur, there's only Noah and his family left. And if God doesn't destroy all the humans on the earth, Homo sapien species is lost. So God preserved the Homo sapien species by the flood of Noah. And so if the modus operandi of the enemy to destroy the human race, I say the human race, the Homo sapien species, if the modus operandi is to corrupt the genome, and he was really close to being successful in Genesis chapter 6 leading up to the flood, how would he do it now? There's no more archaic species around, right? And so I think Genesis chapter 6, if he did that, if that's the modus operandi, then the modus operandi will be the same in the end. Why would we think it would be different? He'll try to corrupt the human genome. Well, so to get back to your question, we're all here and we're all on our way out one fine day, but the end game for the enemy is to uncouple the Homo sapien species from God. So you can do that by sin, spiritually disconnecting, because that's what we see in the Garden of Eden. Okay, you sinned, you don't have your righteous robe on anymore, you got some fig leaves, and you are now peasant farmers. Out the door you go, there's a padlock on the gate, and you're separated from God, and to dust you will return later on. But you have this death spiral that is set in place there. So if you separate man spiritually by sin, you separate the species by DNA corruption, then you have destroyed the species and destroyed the Homo sapiens that God intended for his family. Well, fast forward to now. And if we're at the precipice of the end time, if the aliens, the alien abductions, and all of that represents the seed of the serpent at work, what are they doing, and what is the end time scenario, right? In the end, there's the mark of the beast, right? And everybody thinks it's a gematria riddle. that there's a numeric value to somebody's name, and you can pick probably any celebrity, any politician, and figure out a way to make a gamatrea to say that they're the beast, the Antichrist. But what if that's not it at all? Because if you look at that passage in Revelation, is it Revelation 12? I think it says it's the number. There's two ways you can translate it according to scholars. You can translate it, it's the number of man or the number of a man. So that's really peculiar, isn't it? And the word for man is anthropos, right? The Greek word for humankind, male, female, right? So what if it's not a gamatrea riddle at all? What if the mark is something that changes the very identity of the human species, namely the human genome? And the person that takes the mark, see, we're only now at a place where the human DNA can be changed with CRISPR technology and others that is rapidly advancing. We don't have hybridization. Hybridization's not available to the enemy, to Satan, like it was in Genesis chapter 6, but we now have new technology and we can change human DNA. And so if you change the human DNA to such a state that it's changed, there's some threshold. I can't tell you what the threshold would be, but so I think it's hard to define that. What makes one species different from another one? And there's disagreement about that, and scientists will discuss it. But what would it take to change the human genome? You may have heard of the Dire Wolf Project, where they took a gray wolf and they did 20 CRISPR changes, and they created a offspring that was phenotypically different than the parent. And there was a lot of commercial hype and media, and they resurrected an extinct species of wolf. Well, no, they didn't. But they created an offspring that was phenotypically different than the parents. Did they create a new species there? Well, maybe by some people's definition, you could say that. And so it becomes theoretical conjecture. How much change of your DNA would it take to make you unlike your Homo sapien parents? I don't know the answer to that, but there is an answer, and it is now seemingly within technological reach. And so when you look at the mark of the beast, what happens when you take the mark? Well, you take the mark, you get a mark on your forehead or your wrist, but something far beyond that happens. You are irreversibly disconnected from God and from redemption. You're done. That's it. There is no redemption for you. Now, why do you think that is? I mean, I pose the argument that Jesus Christ is a Homo sapien male. And in Hebrews chapter 2, God's, I think it's chapter 2, God says, you had this kind of conversation between God and Jesus Christ before creation. And God is saying, it's something to the effect that, in sacrifices and burnt offerings, I have no pleasure. And then Jesus says, well, in the volume of the book, it's written of me, I come to do your will, O God. And so you have this situation where there's a Homo sapien that is offered as a sacrifice because animal sacrifices were the wrong species. They only produced a temporary, atonement. A permanent one and forever atonement required a like kind species to provide the atonement, and only God could provide that because the entire human race had been corrupted, inheriting sin from Adam. So God shows up as a Homo sapien male through Jesus Christ. He becomes the sacrificial lamb, and he resurrects from the dead and is now seated at God's right hand. And where's his blood, by the way? Quiz.
I actually don't know the answer to that question. Reverend Stu, what about you?
Well, it depends on if you're talking about bloodline or
no, where's the blood? Where's the blood of Christ now? The blood of Christ in Hebrews chapter 12 is before the throne of God. It is speaking. You know, our redemption was not completed when Jesus said it is finished. The price had been laid down, the life had been shed, the blood had been shed, but the redemption wasn't completed until Hebrews 9 says that Jesus presented his blood before God the Father, and his blood is there in Hebrews chapter 12. It says, is speaking something more excellent than Abel. Abel's blood was crying out to God for justice. The blood of Jesus Christ is before the throne of God saying, this is the blood of the new covenant. This is the blood of the New Testament. It makes a legal statement that your sins and my sins, if you're a Christian, that your sins are forgiven. So it required the sacrifice of a Homo sapien male that only God could provide. It's like Abraham, right? You know, God will provide. Only God had to provide the sacrifice. And he did. And so that's why we have redemption through Christ. That's why you cannot lose your DNA connection with the Homo sapien species. And if you do, it irreversibly, any CRISPR change that's done to your body is irreversible. If you change your DNA, it is irreversible. You have no further access.
If I may, I actually, ironically enough, like 2 weeks ago or so, I spoke to somebody about CRISPR who worked for Bristol Myers Squibb, and they were talking about it, and it was the first time I've actually heard about it, and I thought it was pretty cool to hear about it from someone who's actually doing it. But they were I posed a question of, like, if I understand this correctly, what they're trying to do is potentially like cure cancer essentially on a cellular level.
Of course, yeah.
But they were still sort of working on it. And I tossed out the idea of, well, what if you took the person's DNA and then wrapped the whatever it is that they want to put in you inside of your own DNA so your body doesn't reject it, and then direct it to that specific cell. And then he's like, well, that's exactly what they're trying to sort of work on. Yeah. And I was like, okay, interesting. Now, what that person did not know is that idea well, it's not because I'm a smart person. It actually came from the alien abduction phenomenon, where people who have implants or alleged implants, as you were, the body doesn't reject them because they're wrapped in their own DNA. But anyway, my question is, you know, the implant itself doesn't get rejected by the body because let's call them the aliens, right? They wrap the implant in the person's own DNA before they insert it back into the body.
Well, that may not necessarily be required. I mean, you know, if you have a knee replacement, it's not rejected by your body. You follow me? That's made of titanium.
Okay.
So so we can.
Oh, that's right. I forgot you're a medical doctor. This is great. So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I'm going to right now. The thing that was so anyway, that's where I started. I started in Genesis chapter 6 studying, and now fast forward into the modern time, and I touched on that a little bit. You know, the thing that really rung my bell, that really kind of just startled me, was John Mack's book.
Right.
Okay.
Because, you know, maybe it affects me differently than other people. I guess it probably does. But I understand the mind of a physician, you know? So for me, you know, people come into my clinic will have, musculoskeletal complaints of various sorts, and sometimes neurologic complaints and different things. But, you know, there's maybe, I don't know, 1 in 100, 1 in 200 things that it could be, you know. And after doing this for some decades, things become fairly routine. I usually know what's wrong with people by talking to them for about 5 minutes, and then do an exam and so forth. The thing that I have to be on my toes about is when the white elephant walks in. when the thing that's really peculiar and doesn't seem to fit. For example, about 1.6 cases per thousand of people that present in my kind of a clinic with back pain, it won't really be back pain. It's actually cancer that's masquerading as back pain. I have to tune in to be able to miss, because if I'm a specialist, so if I miss that, it's missed, you know, and, you know, that, and, you know, and that happens, but I never want it to happen on my watch. You know, I want to be careful and conscientious and do a proper job. So I understand Mac, because 40 years experience as a clinical psychiatrist, the head of psychiatry at Harvard Med. He was at the pinnacle of his career, you know, and after 40 years, he gets these referrals to see these people, and he's thinking it's, you know, it'll be some sort of psychic. And he recognized that it wasn't. And that lit him up, because, you know, that's the thing, right? You know, we expect things to to be a certain thing. We expect certain pathology when it's something way different. He recognized it, and he had the courage to step up and say it. And he, you know, it threatened his career. You know that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And he didn't want to write a book. He tried to publish his findings in the New England Journal of Medicine. They rejected it twice. That's when he wrote his book. So, you know, I think I've watched every interview, read as much as I could about him, but he was a very fascinating person. He didn't espouse any faith tradition that I can see from his writing, but it was interesting that he concluded that they were interdimensional, like Jacques Vallée did. And, you know, you have to think, you know, really these things are going to fly from Zeta Reticuli or someplace and come here, and they're interested in what we're doing. It's no, that how does that make any sense at all? You know, I mean, the complexities of interstellar travel aside, I'm not a physicist, but it just doesn't seem to make sense. You know, there's a lot of, you know, people talk about, people say, you know, the universe is so big, there's got to be life somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's a non sequitur, isn't it? Why would we ever think that? If we take a Judeo-Christian perspective, God said, the heavens I made for me, and the earth I made for humans. You have this unique, you know, biosphere that's suitable for life, that we live in, that is so finely tuned that if it gets disrupted, we all go, you know. And why would we think for a minute that there's another planet system somewhere that you know, that has life on it? If you're, you know, if you don't have any faith tradition, or if you're an atheist or whatever, that probably makes sense to you. But from a Judeo-Christian perspective, it makes no sense at all. Not if we think that God created the heavens and the earth, and God created the earth for humans, and he created humans, Homo sapiens, to be his family. It's a not full, complete, unadulterated, bald-faced non sequitur to think that life came from another planet. But back to Dr. Mack, that's what really just startled me to read his book and watch his interviews and everything about him, because I think that's very credible. You know, it's medical information. It's medical study that unfortunately didn't make into peer reviewed. You were asking about implants. You know, people have described implants, but, you know, years ago, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, I'm not sure, well, probably 20, maybe more than 20. I saw somebody for an uncomplicated ankle sprain get an x-ray of his right foot. He's from Saudi Arabia. I have a interpreter. He speaks English. Get the x-ray, and there's two things in his heel that look like pins. And they were about an inch long. They were kind of about the size of a pin that you would use, that ladies would use for sewing or whatever, or, you know, if, people that I do injections. So I think it's maybe about the bore of a 25 gauge needle, very small, about an inch long. Each one, they're precisely parallel. In his heel, there's no scars. He had no recollection of anything. I talked to him, talked to the interpreter. There's no cultural practices that accounted for that. The radiologist didn't know what it was. It didn't look like surgical instrumentation. And I would just tell you that I've done spine injections for decades with a fluoroscope, and I think I'm pretty skilled with placing a needle pretty much wherever I want to put it. But to put two pins precisely parallel from each other, I don't think it's possible. I don't think I could do that with decades of experience doing placing needles with fluoroscopic guidance. So it was a very peculiar thing. I wished I'd have kept the X-ray. I didn't know what to make of it at the time, and in retrospect, I was reading about that stuff, and one of Mac's patients described the aliens putting pins in their feet. It made me think, maybe I saw one of those.
Well, that's very, very interesting. Not expecting that twist.
No.
Is it possible that, I mean, could the person have stepped on something that would be so precise, or like?
No, because it was in the heel bone, looked like the calcaneus.
But in the bone.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it was from the back going forward, probably about a 45-degree angle, going through the base of the heel. It's not like you stepped on a nail and it got lodged in there. It's not like that.
Okay. Did it look like the pins were there to repair or reinforce something, regardless of how they got there?
No, it didn't look like any kind of, and I'm not a surgeon, I'll just say that, but it didn't look like any instrumentation, surgical instrumentation that I've seen.
Interesting.
And it wouldn't be a situation. I don't know how what utility it would make anatomically to have them placed the way they were.
Right.
And it was something he had no knowledge of. And so you see a lot of the abductees talk about not remembering or whatever. So I don't know what to make of it. I'm not saying it's an alien implant. I'm just saying it was really weird. And I thought, after I started reading about that, I thought, well, maybe that was one of them.
Well, that's very interesting from the perspective of the phrase "strike your heel."
Yeah. Well, I mean,
okay,
we're getting away from the alien subject. My previous book on the crucifixion of Jesus, there's only been 3 archaeological finds of crucifixion victims, and the nails were through the heel.
Wow.
The artwork and things that you see where the crucifixion nails go through the top of the foot, that's artistic. That's
rendering or license, interpretation. Yeah.
It's because the crucifixes, images venerating Jesus, didn't come into Christian worship until about the 6th century. And crucifixion had been outlawed about the 3rd century with Constantine. So anybody that made a crucifix or any painting of Jesus never saw a crucifixion. And the only archaeologic finds that we have the nail through the heel.
Right.
And there's a lot written about that in my first book, The Crucifixion of Jesus, a medical doctor examines the death and resurrection of Christ. I go into detail about the medical aspects of Jesus' cause of death. With the forensic reconstruction, I talk about the historical context and how the nails were used and so forth.
Dang.
Excellent. I was meaning my reference was more like a motif of a heel striking, and whether there was some sort of connection there.
Well, it's I think it's interesting because we think about, when we look at artwork, we think that nail went through the top of the foot, but probably based on archaeological evidence, it probably didn't. It went through the heel.
Yeah.
And then when you look at Genesis 3:15, it says you're going to strike his heel. It kind of fits, doesn't it?
Mm.
But again, we can't say exactly what happened to Jesus, but we have to look at the archaeological evidence. It probably happened that way.
Now, on Dr. John E. Mack, I'm impressed that he went to the Ariel School to interview the children who had the group encounter with, you know what I'm referring to?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if these beings are interdimensional, whether they're physical, or whether they're both, but I found that the children's account's very compelling. What do you feel about that yourself?
Yeah, and that's interesting. That's the thing about Mack's work, because I think in his book he described not quite 100. I want to say 80, 90, whatever number it was. He said, but they ranged from age like 2 to 47. And when children are describing things like that, that's kind of hard to explain away as confabulation or some sort of contrived mental illness and things. And again, Mack, again, being a definitive voice in psychiatry, to come up and say these people are not mentally ill, they're having veridical experiences, and particularly among children, that's really hard to explain away.
I guess I'm still confused about the I don't know what I'm trying to say. Let me say it this way. The idea of the alien hybrid program, aliens, humans, hybridization, right? Why, what would the motivation be from the alien perspective? Why would they even care? What benefit would they have to merging with us?
Well, and that's the startling thing about Mack's work is that there's a fairly uniform theme about the encounters or the abductions, is that they're engaged in a hybridization program. And it's not just him, it's in the media, as you mentioned, Tim Burchett, and I think Matt Gates said something about it. So why would they be doing that? Well, to switch over to a biblical perspective, in I think it's chapter 13 in my book, that I try to talk about Bible passages that I think refer to aliens. And Bible prophecies, it's a little rough. Some of it's clear and straightforward. Some of it's really symbolic and subject to disagreement. Let's say it that way. But you have this weird passage in Daniel chapter 2 where Daniel foretells world history, right? With Nebuchadnezzar, and you have this statue of the gold, and then changes to silver and brass, and then the kingdom that's right before the eternal kingdom of the Messiah, it's clay, mixed with iron, right? And then it says, and they attempted to mix with the seed of men, but it didn't take.
Yeah.
That's Daniel chapter 2, verse 43. Who are they that are trying to mingle with the seed of humans?
Mm-hmm.
So I make the case, or it's not me alone, but others, it's not a private interpretation, but I think that if maybe that the hybridization program is to build a corpus of beings that will populate and enforce the kingdom of the beast. Because you have, again, going back to Genesis, you have Satan and you have the seed of the serpent passing through time, descending through time. And their ultimate objective is to overthrow God and destroy God's family of Homo sapiens in the meantime. And so if Daniel, it's amazing, isn't it? He foretells world history. It's pretty striking. But the kingdom right before the eternal kingdom of Messiah is this weird thing happening where there's an attempted admixture of somebody wanting to mix with the seed of humans. It doesn't take, and then bam, there's the Messiah, and we have the eternal kingdom. So I make the suggestion or proposition that refers to an alien hybridization program where they seek to build and enlarge a corpus of beings as operatives of the enemy. They're diabolical. They're not demons. They're not like demons by the descriptions in the Gospels, but they're certainly diabolical, and they seek to populate and enforce the kingdom of the beast. Or at least I think the case can be made for that.
I've been wondering if these external entities are seeking access to physicality through hybridization. So demonic entities can inhabit a human form through possession, as we've seen in the Gospels. I'm wondering if this push to hybridize is going to give them some greater access, a more sustained access into physicality. Is that a possibility?
I suppose, but I think they're separate. I mean, I think there's plenty of willing partners on the earth for demons to kind of motivate and activate. I think it's a separate thing. I think that the alien hybridization program is the seed of the serpent, seeking to populate or to to enforce a one world government at the end of time.
Yeah, distinct from this demonic layer or element.
I think so. I mean, not to minimize the dynamic, and also not to, give it too much airtime, because as Christians, I think we have authority, and we can repel those things, and that's part of, alien abductions can be stopped by invoking the name of Jesus, right?
I've heard of that.
So that's something I guess a lot of people don't know or don't talk about. So they're certainly dark from the dark spiritual world. I would say they're interdimensional. But I would say that they are subject to the name of Jesus Christ, and that alien abductions can be stopped and halted to never occur again. But I do think that that's different and separate from demonic possession. So maybe it's a fine distinction. I think that the hybrid population, this is all mind-boggling, isn't it? I was never interested in this stuff. And I still, when I talk about it, I think this is so strange, But I mean, it's like studying, the book is a product of 5 years of study, and just reading about it, it's like, hiding your head in the sand is not helpful. These things have become, it's no longer are people ridiculed for talking or saying they saw a UFO. I mean, that's really what happened to Mac, right? If you're a high level government official and you say you saw a UFO, well, to the psychiatrist you go. And so then he starts seeing these people, and it's like, oh no, this is not mental illness. This is real. And he had the courage to come out and say that. So
I find all this fascinating, which is why I, donate a lot of my time, as it were, to investigate and to chat with people who have had experiences. And I want to toss out potentially like a curveball, I guess, and see what you think about it. Because there's a lot of, well, first of all, I want to address the idea of an alien abduction stopping when somebody says, in the name of Jesus Christ, stop. I have heard that. I think that's a little bit more on the newer side. So if anyone out there's in the UFO community, you might be hearing that for the first time, but you're probably going to start hearing that a lot more, I think. But I also want to say that I think it depends on the lens of the person, because there's definitely, this is an interesting, if you don't mind entertaining just a little short monologue here, because there's a lot of thoughts that are coming into my mind from people that I've just spoken with within the last couple of weeks, that I want to unpack with both you guys. So there, like 2 days ago, I spoke with somebody who said something was happening, and they used all of their might, and they just said stop as loud as they could. They didn't say Jesus Christ. They just said stop, and it stopped. And about a week before that, I was speaking with somebody who, the gray beings, as it were, asked for their permission. Like we're going to answer your questions that you've been thinking about, but it's going to be difficult for you to accept. Are you sure you want to do it? So there's like a free will aspect almost to this encountering phenomenon. But the main thing that I wanted to say was the trifecta that always seems to come up again and again and again for people who've had experiences or encounters is these beings say, treat your planet right, take care of your planet, stop warring with each other, stop killing each other, and be a good person. So that I don't know what to think about that, because on one hand, that sounds like a really nice thing to say. On the other hand, I will admit that it's probably it's just not nice to be taken out of your room against your will in the middle of the night, as typically happens. So I honestly don't know what to make of like the dichotomy of that. Like your friend isn't going to do that to you, but yet those are the things that are said. So a little bit, I guess, more of a conversation starter.
Well, part of it, as a human being, I think people do have some authority to just say no. And I think, if I remember, I heard, I think Gary Nolan saying one time that he thought an abduction was starting to occur, and he said no and stop, and that was it. Now, so I don't know a lot about him. I don't think he embraces a Judeo-Christian faith, as far as I know. But I think that just being a human being, again, I would say in the image and likeness of God, that you can repel evil, whether it's demon or, as I would say, seed of the serpent through alien abductions and whatnot. I think that part of that is a purely human volition, but most of the things that I read, people feel like they're completely out of control. They have no power over anything. But then if they invoke the name of Jesus in that context, they're able to abort the abduction. In terms of alien messaging, why would we think that they're telling the truth about anything? Why would we trust? People could be nicer to each other. Okay, I'll accept that one. But if we're at a precipice where there's political movement to do a reveal about aliens, Trump wants to make it part of his legacy. What is the messaging going to be? There are elder brothers. They planted us here. They're really what people used to call gods. They want us to be nice to each other and don't trash the planet while you're at it, and don't blow each other up, and don't, kind of try to be nice, and we'll help you with technology, and we're your big brother, and oh look, here's a hybrid, and look, he's got some human DNA, so you see we're related, and what is their messaging going to be? And probably interacting with these things, I mean, to think that anything is valid about how it is presented, I think is a mistake. I think it's important to understand that they are instruments of evil, that their motivation is diabolical. And as you said, no friend kidnaps someone and does rape-like experiments on them against their will. There's nothing good about it. And if and that's what I make the point, I think that it's like a Trojan horse, okay, we want to know everything about UFOs, and we want everything revealed, and we want all this stuff. Okay, that's fine. But what are you going to do with that information, and how are you going to interpret it? And if you interpret it as they're our elder brothers, they want us to be nice to each other. They don't want us to, dirty up the planet. They, we can learn from them. We can learn technology. It's all going to be good. It's like, oh no, it's not going to be good. And it's at the precipice of the final one world government that precedes the coming of Christ. And, the coming of Christ, the second coming of Christ, he's coming with a blowtorch. It's not going to be pretty. Right. And so, if you're on the wrong side of that, it's bad. And that's, I make the point in the book. I mean, if a lot of people, I think, think we're gonna be raptured out. We're not gonna see any of this stuff. And the consensus of the pre-Nicene fathers was that we would see the man of sin. Christians would see the man. So, and when you look at the scriptures and the arguments, and I don't want to, it's funny to me that people will adopt a position and become dogmatic about it. If you came to me with a certain ailment and I said, well, it's one of 3 diagnoses, which ones do you choose?
Right.
That's not what you want, right? You want to do due diligence to find the best one. But if you can't particularly nail it down, then you've got to take pause and take a step back. And I think it's worthwhile to consider that the church may see the man of sin. And if we do, then you need to be prepared to take a bullet, and you need to reject the mark of the beast and everything, that flies against the face of Jesus Christ. You need to be prepared for that. And that's the case I make in the end of the book, is that people, ever since I've known anything about Christian life, people have been saying, we're at the end time, we're at the end time.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
I think the apostles were saying that.
Yeah, but if we're at the moment where aliens are going to be revealed, and if those aliens are from Daniel chapter 2, verse 43, then we are really there. And we're really at a time where people need to be prepared to understand that this is a really bad thing, and to not think of it in any other way, and to have the resolve to know that, you do not take the mark. You do not let anybody alter your DNA. You do not take a mark. You take a bullet before you do that.
Well,
okay. I got a sensitive one here, Mike, and you might want to cut this out.
Well, hold on a second. I have a question. I've gone fuzzy, so I want to try to my camera.
Oh, right, okay.
I want to just come back into now I'm back into focus. All right, that's never happened before. I don't think. Anyway, all right. So go for it, Stu.
Okay, this is a bit of a sensitive one, but I've heard during my Christian life that some Christians thought the credit card was the mark of the beast. Right up to the COVID vaccination is the mark of the beast. So where's the line where you think, okay, this is finally it? Not you personally, but where do we think, okay, this is the one?
The thing about the mark that I think that makes me think it's genetic editing is because it irreversibly disconnects you from forgiveness, from the atonement of Christ. And how would you do that? How would you do that on a population scale? Change the species, change the DNA, and then they're disconnected from the Homo sapien male Jesus Christ. That's why I think it's a genetic change. But by the way, if you take the genetic change, then you get to use digital currency, and you can buy a cup of coffee.
Mm-hmm. There are some perks.
Yeah.
I mean that sarcastically.
But they're gonna, people are gonna be saying, they want the rocks to fall on them and die, but they can't. They're not dying, and so you don't get to shorten the difficulty of living through that. And again, the most telling thing, I think, is that the mark irreversibly excludes you from the atonement of Christ. And I think the way to do that, what makes the most sense to me, I can't think of another way to do that on a population scale except to change the species so that it's unlike the Homo sapien male Jesus Christ.
I don't know. Forgive me for saying this, but maybe I just came up with the answer while you were talking.
Love it.
Reverend Stu and I had multiple conversations now about AI with various people. Mm-hmm. And it's come up like transhumanism, I think it's called, where people are essentially trying to figure out a way to project their consciousness into a machine. And all the stuff that you're talking about, Joseph, sounds a heck of a lot to me like this transhuman idea. And if someone is successful at doing it and then a bunch of people do it, that sounds like, from my perspective, the thing that you're talking about. Maybe not so much as genetic alteration per se, but I guess in a way you could look at it that way because you're now going into, the machine, as it were.
Inhabiting some sort of physicality that never dies.
Yeah. So then,
well,
I don't know. For me, that all just tied together in that thought.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the term transhumanism was coined by Julian Huxley, the biologist and philosopher, right? And so if you, his idea was that, technology has advanced to the place where we can now direct evolution and create the transhuman and make something better. Well, what if the beast comes along and says, oh, I'm going to give you part of my DNA and it's going to be great. You're going to feel good. You're going to live a long time. You're not going to be depressed. You don't need any medications. It'll all be great. And basically transhumanism, right? And then if we direct evolution that way, and if you reject that, well, then you're part of the problem. And, executing you is the right thing to do because, you're part of the problem. You need to get with the program because we're advancing the species.
Interesting.
And I so I don't know. I mean, projecting my consciousness into a computer is a little far-fetched for me. I can't quite grasp that. Maybe one fine day, maybe that'll be possible. I don't know. But I really think it comes more down to the individual human, that Homo sapiens that God created to be his family, and Satan wants to destroy us and God. And he thinks he can. He's going to go to the garden, to the Armageddon, and he thinks he can still win. And I guess he reads the Bible. I know he does, because he tries to,
can quote it.
He can quote it.
He can.
He tried to kill every baby in Bethlehem. He knew what the Pharisees knew. Every time that there was a covenant or promise of God, he knows. He's quick to get on there. But I think he's of such a level of narcissism that I think he can overthrow that. I can't read his mind, but I would have to think that if he can read that his power has been destroyed, but he keeps fighting on, why is he doing that? He must think the end will be different than predicted.
Well, he definitely tries to influence the outcome during the temptation of Jesus, and there's that act of volition that needs to occur. Mm-hmm. So Jesus is given a certain 3 temptations, and the way to get Jesus on board, Mike, is for him to use his own free will and to choose that path. So there's that free will layer as well. I find that very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I just want to ask this question. Is it possible for, is it possible for a demon to project unconditional love?
They hate you. What are you talking about?
It was a provocative question. I liked
it. Satan is consumed with hatred, right?
I think he means emulation of that kind of energy.
Can that be faked?
Yeah, because you just referenced Joseph about an entity coming saying, "Look, I'm here to help you. This is we're benevolent. We're going to give you this. We're going to give you that. We love you. Why don't you let us integrate and take our gifts?"
That's the Trojan horse thing, right?
Right.
And then you say, "Oh yes, come on in with a handshake," and then it will spiral into something ugly.
Interesting. Well, I have to say, I wasn't sure how this conversation was going to go, but one of our couple conversations ago, we were talking with Dustin from Utah, and he said, like, anyone who talks about this topic, nobody yells at each other, nobody fights each other, everyone's respectful, and I think that's very, very true. But I mean, Joseph, you've given me a different perspective to think about for sure. So I want to thank you for that. And I mean, I still, I guess I'm on the fence, as it were, in terms of my personal outlook on it. But it's something to think about, because I get all kinds of questions as I talk to folks, and people have asked me point blank, like, what do you think it is, or whatever.
Mike, may I ask you, are you a Christian?
Yeah, I'm raised a Roman Catholic.
Okay. And
I'll admit that I haven't gone to church in quite a long time, but I am a Christian, yeah.
But I think you would say you believe the Bible's true.
Yes.
Okay. I want you to get my book. Tell me your address. I'll send you a copy of my book. I want you to read it, and then I want you to tell me I'm wrong.
Okay. Will do.
Because I think the pieces of the puzzle fit together. Again, I was never interested in this. Most I knew about UFOs was Star Trek. The live long and prosper. That's a Jewish blessing.
Wow.
Is it? I did not know that.
Yeah. And do you remember Steve McQueen's debut movie, The Blob?
Oh my gosh.
You probably don't. You're too young for that.
I think I vaguely remember seeing some of it as a really young kid, and it freaked me out.
Well, I was never interested in this, and then I thought, but then I started studying, like I said, in Genesis, that's what started me off. And then I thought, well, if that's the modus operandi, then it's going to be the same. And then when I stumbled into John Mack's work, I thought, oh, that was so startling to me. It was just startling to me. Again, because of who he is, because I understand the mind of a physician. I understand exactly and he's smarter than me for sure, I would say, or he's gone now, but brilliant mind. He won a Pulitzer Prize for his psychological biography of Lawrence of Arabia. And I think he was such a gifted communicator that when he couldn't find communication in medical literature, he went and just in public media wrote a book. And it took courage because it threatened his career.
Yeah.
And
amazing bravery, and he's following where the data leads. He's got that bravery and integrity to do that.
And I don't know. I think, and I don't know. I don't really know anything about Lawrence of Arabia, but I think he must have admired him, and there was probably some sense of courage or something that he identified with that brought him into the public venue. I mean, he was on Oprah, he was on everything, and for someone like him, an elite academic, to take that pathway is, it's really different. It took courage to do that.
Yeah.
And I think we're in debt, but that's what it startled me.
I'd like to just, props to you as well, Joseph. I mean, you're a medical doctor, and you're talking about this topic openly, and thank you for that, because I think and hope that you will inspire other professionals to embrace the topic and to be open to talking about it. It's important that we start having these conversations.
Yeah. And I want to thank you guys for having me. I've never been on a podcast before, so you're the first, and very enjoyable. I enjoyed the discussion very much. And,
well, thank you very much. We're honored to be your first podcast. I hope it's the first of many for you, because I think it went really well. And for anyone listening out there, can you let them know, like, where can they pick up a copy of your book?
Well, it's on Amazon.
We'll put the links then in the description everywhere. So anyone who's watching or listening, if you want to check that out, just look at the description and there'll be a link there to go to.
I have a website, Medical Doctor Examines Jesus, and people can email me that way, and I try to be good about responding and keeping up.
Okay. Is that medicaldoctorexaminesjesus.com?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Great. Wonderful. So, Joseph, it's been great. It's very enlightening, and I do appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Much love and respect to you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, Reverend Stu. That was quite something. I mean, honestly, I wish we would. We stopped the recording with Joseph, and we talked for another like 30 plus minutes. I wish we could have kept recording the whole darn time. We have a great conversation after as well. But what are your thoughts on the public side of the conversation?
Oh, well, I'm really impressed by how brave and open he was with the discussion. Now, that was his first podcast ever, so we're greatly honored that he chose to do that on our show.
Yes, that's awesome. That's awesome. We love it. And it's important that, people want to participate in the conversation and step up, and start having these conversations, even if, and I got to say, like, right from the start, I said, like, I don't necessarily agree, but, I listened to it, and you know what? I'm not necessarily changed of my opinion, but I'm more open to the idea, maybe, perhaps, if that makes sense. Like,
it does to me. Yeah, I've got a lot to ponder after that discussion. I was very impressed that he brought up Dr. John E. Mack and spoke so highly of him. I certainly hold him in high regard. And it really made me aware that he's also doing some great work by coming, the books he's been publishing and coming on our show and just spreading the message in a similar vein to what Dr. Mack did, and similar level of bravery, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree. And he graciously gave us a preview copy of the book, and I think I said this in the off-air conversation, but I told him, I was like, I went right into the UFO sections only, really, and honed in on it, and I told him I was very impressed with how he put it all together, taking a whole lot of information and sort of condensing it down to. I was just overall impressed with his presentation of the material, as it were, especially from someone who isn't into it at all. He's not a ufologist, and he's so I give him props for that too.
Yeah, he was an intelligent, articulate man, and he put some really interesting information on the table for us here that we haven't exactly had from other guests, and I always appreciate that. So that's why I got some extra things to think about now.
Me too. So I mean, I'll just say it. I'm pleasantly surprised because I wasn't sure how that was going to go. But I'm glad that we had that conversation with Joseph, and it was good stuff.
I don't mind when I'm not 100% sure what's going to happen, because it makes it very organic and natural. So I feel good about that. So questions emerge when we're talking, and sometimes questions will emerge for me, but I don't want to interrupt the guest when they're in their flow too. So that's also why we had a bit of a discussion after the recording, and there was some very interesting content there too. So I would 100% be up to having him back again sometime in the future.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I would too. I like I said, I wish I would have just kept rolling the whole darn time. But nonetheless.
Well, I'll tell you, he's going to send us some more information, which I'm going to read over. And at that point, we might reach out for another conversation potentially.
Yeah, I'd definitely be up for that as well.
Fantastic. Great guest.
Absolutely. So remember to like and subscribe and share and do all that good stuff to help the robot deliver these conversations to other people who are interested in and who can you help the discovery process when you do that, and it's totally free. So please go ahead and do that. And for audio only folks, if you haven't heard already, you can now text us if you have any comments or questions or compliments or whatnot. Only the last 4 of your phone number will be visible, and go ahead and feel free to reach on out and interact with us. That's the whole point of all this.
We would absolutely love to hear from you. That's a fantastic thing. Extra layer we've got there. Well, as always, much love, and thank you for joining us on this journey together.